Hey everybody, this is Carrie Clark from speechandlanguagekids.com. Today I am answering a question from Tessa, and Tessa is asking about childhood apraxia of speech and how you treat that, especially in younger children. And honestly, I am in the process of working on an entire multimedia course for apraxia of speech, so this is a topic which is much too large to answer thoroughly in a 5 to 10 minute, 10 to 15, whatever these videos have been, but in that length of time. So I'm going to give an overview of what would be the treatment approach for a younger child with childhood apraxia of speech. Okay, so the overview, I want to include 3 parts. So there are 3 different kind of main areas that you want to think about when you're looking at therapy for these children. The first one is functional speech. The next one is motor practice. And the third one is AAC, or alternative communication means. So let's go through each of those 3 parts of this program. So the first part, and I should preface this by saying that a lot of this is based on my own experience, but also the information that I got from Nancy Kaufman during my interview with her on my podcast. And she had a wonderful interview with me where she kind of outlined all these steps and went into some more depth about the therapy. So if you haven't watched or listened to that yet, please head over to the website or the podcast and you can get the Nancy Kaufman episode, and I'll link to that below the show notes here. Okay, so the first part is functional speech. So that means things that the child is able to say to the adults around him that they are able to understand and serves as functional communication for him. So for this, we want to target highly preferred words and words that are going to give that child what he really, really wants. So if that child really, really loves to eat, eat would be a really good power word for him to have. It's going to be a functional word that he can use throughout his day to get his wants and needs met. You really want to think about what are those words that this child, if he was able to communicate, what are those words that he would be communicating a lot? Or try to find words that could be used for a lot of different things. So go is one that I often teach my children with apraxia, because go can be used to indicate a lot of different things if you have a limited vocabulary. So it can mean I want to go on the swing. It can mean I want to go on the bike. It can mean I want that toy to go. It can mean I want you to go away because I'm having problems with you right now. There are a lot of different uses for the word go, and so that makes it a very powerful word for that child. And the more power words that we have in that child's vocabulary, the more empowered he's going to feel and the more confident he is going to feel as a communicator. So try to come up with a list of words that you think are going to be really powerful for that child and really helpful for them to be able to communicate. So how we work on these, you want to target the full word. You don't want to try to just target the first sound and then build sounds up. With children with apraxia, you want to target the whole word, because that's where they have trouble, is sequencing those sounds together to make entire words. So you're going to start with targeting the entire word, and you're going to teach the child to get as close as he possibly can to that target word. So what Nancy Kaufman calls this is the successive approximations approach. And that means that you're going to start with whatever the child can produce as close as he can get, and you're going to bit by bit move it closer and closer to the target word. So let's say, for example, the word is eat, and the child says, Well, maybe the first step then would just be to get them to say e instead of So you're taking one sound and changing it to make it a little bit closer to the target. So then you're like, okay, say it like me, e, and you're just trying to get them to say e. Now I know I just told you not to start with one sound, but in this example, the word is only 2 sounds, so your approximation is 1 sound long. Now if you were working on cookie, then maybe your approximation would be tutti. Okay, so you don't have to start with just 1 sound. You just need to get closer to the production than what the child's currently doing. So let's go back to the eat example. The child's saying and then you're trying to get them to say e. So you get them to say e. Now he says e when he wants to eat. So as soon as he gets to that point, then you're going to push him up to the next level. You're going to say, okay, now we have to say eat, and try to get that extra sound on there. Alternatively, if the child can't say e, you could try to get him to say because he's saying you can add that T on there, and then you can move towards the E sound after you get the T on. So you can just gradually build yourself closer and closer to the target word that the child is trying to say, and teach all the other adults in his life, okay, if he says that means eat, and we have to reward it. So that makes sure that everybody's consistent across the board. Okay, so you're working on those highly preferred words, you're working on the entire word, and you're working on the closest approximation that that child is going to be able to produce. Now, you can use prompting and cueing with these kiddos when you're trying to do this. So if you're trying to get them to say butter, I don't know why, let's go with it, butter, you would say, look at my lips, look, butter, push your lips together, so you're prompting them. Or you could use something like hand cues. For example, when I'm trying to get a child to say the B sound, I do a letter B with my hand and I put it next to my mouth so they can see it. B. And that just shows that child, oh, that's the B sound. And it gives them an extra stimulus to understand what sound you're saying and kind of prompt that sound along. Make sure if you do decide to use hand cues that you make sure that everybody in the child's life is using the same hand cues so that it's consistent across the board. And then you also want to fade those cues and those prompts back as quickly as you can. So they needed to get started, that's fine. But once they get it, pull those cues back as quickly as you can because you don't want them to rely on those cues. You want them to be independent communicators. So there's that. And then the other thing with functional speech is you want to, as quickly as possible, move those functional words into phrases and sentences. So as soon as you can get them to say more than one word at a time, you need to be working on that, especially with these functional things. So if the child is working on eat, and maybe he gets E and he's getting pretty close and you're still working on the T, you can go ahead and work on I eat and have him practice the phrase or the sentence. You want to try to get that child using longer sentences and phrases as early as possible because children with apraxia of speech have trouble with that sequencing component. They have trouble putting parts together. So if you're already working on sentences and phrases when they're a young child, they're going to be better off when they get to the older stages when they really do need to be sequencing those words together. So start with the functional words, but put them in functional phrases and functional sentences as quickly as you possibly can. And help everyone else on the team practice as well. So if you're working on eat, if that's the target word, make sure that every time the child says it in the classroom, the teacher isn't prompting him to say E. Or make sure every time he says it at home that the parents are prompting him to say E. Everybody needs to be on the same page and everybody needs to be consistent with this throughout that child's day. Children with apraxia of speech need lots of repetition, and it's going to be the best repetition if it happens functionally throughout the day. So that is the column of functional speech. That includes those highly preferred words, moving into phrases and sentences as quickly as possible, and getting everybody to practice those throughout the day. Okay, so that's 1/3 of your therapy approach right now. That's 1/3 of your time should be spent on that. I'm not going to tell you exactly 1/3 because you can probably divvy it up a little bit differently if you wanted to, but 1/3 should be on that functional speech. The next third of your time should be on motor practice, and this is about sequencing sounds together and putting sounds together into words. So you want to start with very short words for this portion of your practice. So this would be like a consonant and a vowel, like go, or a vowel and then a consonant, like eat. And this could be some of the same words that you're doing for your functional speech words if you have some short words that you're using there, but you don't have to limit your functional speech to these short words. If the child really wants to say cookie, teach him the best approximation of cookie that he can say. But for the motor practice part, you want to go down to those really short, go, up, eat, in, out. Pick some of those very, very short words, and you're just going to practice those over and over and over again. Now, I know that this can be kind of difficult with young children, especially those with apraxia of speech that know this is hard for them and they don't want to practice it. So you're going to have to find ways to make it fun and keep them motivated. And you're going to want to cue them and try to make them as successful as you possibly can. So if they're saying go, I like to do a G down by my throat for the G, for a letter G for the G sound. So I'll say g, g, go, and I'll help prompt them. Remember, your tongue goes back. Go, and prompt them through that. Again, fading those prompts and cues as quickly as you can, but that will definitely help them put those sounds together. You want to practice these many, many times, like I said, and one of the things that I like to do is create a flip book for this, and I'm not sure where this idea came from. I know I've seen other therapists do it, and I'm sure there's some research or basis for this somewhere, but I don't know that for sure. So I can't tell you that this is 100% research backed, but I will do a flip book where I will have a stack of cards that are the consonants that the child can produce and a stack of cards that are the vowels that the child can produce. And I will flip through one of those decks. I'll lay them next to each other and I'll flip through one of those decks at a time. So let's say I have consonant and then vowel. I will have them say this, whatever the combination is. So like, let's say the first one is go, and then I will flip the consonant to the next consonant. Now they have do, and then they have no, and then they have bow. So I'll have them go through and practice keeping one sound the same and changing the other one. It gives them that practice of sequencing different things over and over again. Then we'll go through and flip the vowels. So we'll start with the G, and we'll have go, and then we'll have gi, and then we'll have ga, and we'll flip through like that. So that kind of makes it a little more fun, moves it a little more quickly, and you can say once we get through the flip book, then you get to play or you get to take a break, whatever it is that you need to do. But that'll get you some reps in pretty quickly. And then what you want to do with this portion of your practice is you just want to slowly build up in length and complexity. So you start with, let's say you start with consonant vowel, and they do really well with that. They're able to say consonant vowel. Okay, now you're going to go on to vowel consonant. They keep working on that for a while. They did that. Okay, now do consonant, vowel, consonant. Keep building up and building up until you get harder and harder words. And what you should see is that once they have mastered that type of word, you can use that type of word in your functional speech a lot easier. They should be able to get those words a lot quicker. And then you just move up through complexity. Okay, so those are the first two portions. We have the functional speech and the motor practice. I like to do the functional speech in the classroom or in a push-in kind of environment or during play, something very functional. And then the motor practice is when I take them to my speech room, we sit down, we drill through the words, and then we take a break. And then we drill real hard, and then we take a break. So those are kind of two different settings and two different types of therapy as well. The third part that you need to consider for children with apraxia of speech is AAC, or augmentative and alternative communication. And the reason I say this is because there are many, many, many children out there with apraxia who don't have the functional communication good enough to communicate their basic wants and needs. And every child has the right to communicate their basic wants and needs. This is not a right that you can take away from a child just because they can't say it. So if you have a child who is unable to communicate to their parents, to their teachers, to their friends, and just really unable to get their message across in a clear manner and to the extent that they want to get it across, then you have an obligation to make sure that child has an alternative way to get that need met and to communicate those things. So even if that child has some functional speech, if they don't have enough to keep them communicating the way they want to be communicating, you're probably going to be seeing a lot of behaviors, you're probably going to be seeing a lot of frustration, and that's a great sign to you that you need to provide some sort of a backup system that they can use when their speech fails them, because it's going to fail them. Now, if you have a child who maybe just has mild apraxia or is a little bit older and is beyond this point, you don't need to look at AAC, but it is something you need to consider for every child with apraxia and determine if it's something that they need. Now, if you do have a child who needs that AAC, keep in mind that using AAC is not going to hinder their speech. The research all points to the fact that using an alternative communication system does not stop speech development. It does not slow speech development down. In fact, for a lot of children, it speeds it up. The reason I think that is because those children know that they have a backup system, so they're more willing to take chances with their speech and try to tell you something because they know if it doesn't work out, they can always go to their backup system. So don't not do it just because you think it's going to hold them back or you think they're not going to speak then. And you need to make sure that you train the staff that's working with that child and the family to use that AAC appropriately. I'm not going to go into all the details of AAC just because it's its own very full topic. So there's plenty of AAC resources on my website. You can find those. I'll link to those as well. And that will help you kind of understand the AAC world a little bit more. But just keep in mind that you do need to be looking at that component for those kiddos. So there are the three parts. Work on functional speech, work on motor practice, and make sure that AAC is considered and implemented if needed. I hope that answers your question to some degree. Like I said, I will be having some apraxia materials coming out in the future, so you can stay tuned for that. I will definitely be letting you all know when any progress gets made on that. And if you have any questions or any other comments that you'd like to add, please feel free to add those to the show notes below, and I will be checking those as well. Thank you so much for watching.